On, guys, this is the 3D Dynasty podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, brought to you by Circa Sports. Circa Sports is back with their Circa Survivor and Circa Millions contest. $14 million up for grabs. Get all the details at circasports.com. Welcome in, everybody. It is Scott Fishbowl Eve. It is Scott Fishbowl Kickoff. It is everything Scott Fishbowl right now, and we're going to talk about Scott Fishbowl. Brought in one of my favorite analysts in the industry, Pat Fitzmaurice. Hey, Pat.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for having me on. I'm pretty giddy about the start of the Scott Fishbowl, as always. I mean, it's like the mark of midsummer. You know, you're like halfway through the summer when the Scott Fishbowl hits. It's just, and it gets the juices flowing for the NFL season, man. It's the kickoff of peak fantasy football season.
It really is. And, you know, one of the things that I love about it is it really brings the community together, talks, you know, you get to really see the goodness of what can happen when, you know, when a community comes together, all the money that's raised, as well as all the different people coming out doing a lot of cool stuff and getting to interact with each other, live events all over. So I'm going to a live event in Cincinnati this week. I know they got, you know, about $10,000 worth of stuff they're giving away. All you have to do is donate to be able to be a part of it. I think there's do you know how many live events there are?
I'm not sure, but I'm doing the same thing you're doing in Chicago. Like, I won't be part of that draft, but just like I did last year, I'm going to go and hang out just because it's fun and I know a lot of those people and it's a good time. I want to be part of it.
Yeah, and I'm not in that. Of course, I'm ready to pitch it if I need to, but I'm just going there. I'm gonna do a card break. We're gonna give away some cards, and we're gonna have some fun. And Brad, what division are you in, Brad?
I'm in the Papa John's this year. I was in the Akron division last year, and Conference 8 the year before that, and I went with my hometown favorite. Papa John Shatner out of Louisville, Kentucky, right around where I grew up. So it worked out perfectly when I saw that opening at the 107 spot, which is a prime drafting location for Scott Fishbowl. In Brad's opinion, anyway.
I'm in the 6th spot. I'm in the Maruchan Ramen. Basically, one of my buddies is in that league, so I joined it. Plus, the 6th spot was available, which I like. Pat, what are you in?
I'm in the Culver's division, so, you know, Wisconsin-based burger chain. I'm a Wisconsin boy, and my son was actually working at Culver's until just recently. So, and I'm picking 6th. I seem to be, you know, of the same mind as you guys. I kind of like patrolling the middle. You know, the positional runs don't get away from you. It's just kind of easy to, I don't know, stay on top of things. It's not like you'll never get sniped in the middle, but you'll definitely not be, caught on the wrong end of any major positional runs.
Yeah, I was at the 101 last year, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna go and start. I'm gonna get a tight end now, just because I'm afraid there's not gonna be a tight end that comes back to me. Not a single tight end was drafted between my pick and my next pick, but there was about 15 or 16 receivers, which I should have went with. And so that was definitely my downfall. Still made the playoffs, but not as good of a team because of that receivers. So let's talk about the scoring this year. But before that, I do have a dynasty dilemma for you, Pat. I'm sure you probably are in a bunch of dynasty leagues. You might commish a few. What are your feelings about trade deadlines? I know some people are very against them. Some people are completely they need to have them. They think it's really fair to have them, and some people just don't care.
Oh man, I'm going to irritate some people by saying this, but I do prefer a deadline, and I do run a league, and we do have a deadline, and I think it's after, as soon as kickoff of whatever week right after Thanksgiving, like the Sunday after Thanksgiving, as soon as the noon games or the early games kick off, that's it. And then just shut down until the fantasy championship is done, and then the next day people can trade again. But I found that, even the people who are committed to not having trade deadlines will get ticked off if they are, in championship contention, and one of the other teams in championship contention swings a gigantic blockbuster trade for future assets for like this immediate windfall of talent. I just feel like when you're doing that, like before a wild card game or something like that, or before your division championship, like that's just, I don't know, it's a little beyond the pale for me. I think if you make the cutoff late in the regular season, it's sort of fair. Everyone knows what they're dealing with as the playoff push comes to a head. I don't like those big deals that can really tilt the scales during the playoffs or, just before the start of the playoffs.
Yeah, and so mine are usually the kickoff of playoff week. So if Thursday night at 8:00, that's the done. So you see a bunch of deals happen, but at that point you have a week where everyone knows who's in, who's out, and then you can make decisions right there versus people making decisions in the playoffs or making decisions 3 or 4 weeks when you don't really know if you're going to make it or not. Brad, any quick opinions on that?
Yeah, the one thing I would add is, especially from a dynasty perspective, longevity is key. And when you have what Pat's example was of this windfall of talent and future asset picks and all these things happen at the championship week or during the playoffs, you can find yourselves in a situation where you have a team that is almost unfillable if that owner decides to move on and leave the league. I have had instances where I've had to pay, offer to pay the first 2 years of entry fee just because that player had no, players that were aged out, had no picks for the future, next couple years, and to say, hey, look, I know, I get it. I will cover your entry fee for the next couple years just to keep the league going because it was one that had been going for a long time. So just keep longevity in mind when you're making these decisions, because that's really that's the whole reason you play Dynasty, is to be playing for a long time with people that you enjoy playing with.
Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of, you need to pay if you trade like a future first round pick, you need to pay that year in advance. Some people do any future pick, but I think at least a first round pick. If Pat wants to trade his 2024 first, I'm going to say, Pat, this trade can go through as soon as you pay your dues next year. And so if Pat ends up wanting to go all in and trade all of his picks, then that team, that you just, deserted, I can just hand that over to Brad and say, Pat's already paid the next 2 years. Before we get into the scoring, I want to make sure to talk to you guys about Circa Sports. Circa Millions and Circa are back. Circa Survivor are back. 14 million in guaranteed prizes up for grabs. Circa Millions, 5 NFL picks against the spread each week. Circa Survivor, just pick a different money line winner each week. Enter in Vegas, play from anywhere. Sports Gambling Podcast will be out there the last weekend in August. Circasports.com for all the details. Circasports.com. What would you do with all the money if you won? I mean, we'd probably join a whole bunch of dynasty leagues. I don't know about you guys. The kids would definitely get some fresh gear. My wife would get all the pool upgrades that she wants. Let's talk about the scoring. And so the scoring for the Scott Fish Bowl is always so fun. It's just as fun as seeing all the waves of all the entries. Passing touchdowns, 6 points. Completion bonuses of 0.1. First downs, 0.1 for quarterbacks. Well, for all passing. 1 point for 25 yards. 2 points per 2-point conversions. No more negatives for sacks. No more negatives for, you don't have that Jared Goff, negative 6 points, Jameis Winston kind of deal. What are your thoughts there about that? That really does help the pocket passers out quite a bit in balancing the scoring.
It does help the pocket passers. Although I think, with the rushing, the half point for first down, that maybe, tilts things back towards the running quarterbacks a little. Yeah, I mean, I it does help the uber efficient guys. Like, a couple of years ago, I know people felt that Derek Carr got a big value bump out of the scoring system. And, that the high efficiency guys, maybe this is a good Jared Goff scoring system. So it's definitely something worth considering, especially for your second quarterback. I think I still would prefer to have a mobile quarterback be my first pick. But, it alters what type of second quarterback I think you're looking at quite a bit in a lot of cases.
And so, Brad, a 6-point rushing TD, 1 point per 10 yards, 2 points, 2-point conversion, 1 point per first down, 0.25 per carry. That definitely helps your Nick Chubbs out there, your J.K. Dobbins, the guys that Brad really likes that don't really catch the ball as much.
Yeah, it 100% does. But on the flip side of that, just like Pat was talking about for the rushing quarterbacks and the pocket passing quarterbacks, that little bump in receiving still gives those PPR running backs a little bit more value. So even though you're going to see Dameon Pierce's, maybe scoot above that 300 fantasy point per season threshold, you're going to see some of these PPR, a lot more of the PPR fantasy running backs, most likely over the 400 point threshold, which kind of negates the plus that you're getting out of those first and second down running backs.
Yeah, and as far as the receiving, 6-point receiving touchdown, 1 point per 10 yards, 2 points for 2-point conversions, 1 point per first down, 1 full point per reception. The tight ends get an extra 1 point per first down, 1 point. So a double. It's really like a double tight end premium. You get the double reception, double first down. It's definitely a super tight end premium. Then you get the kicker, which it's a kicker premium league because they get 3.3 points for 8 extra points. Then it's 37-yarder, 3.7. 24 would be 2.4. So if they get a 57-yard field goal, it's 57. And I'll tell you right now, you see it in my mock draft. It will show in a second. Last year, I was starting 3 or 4 kickers after like week 4 when bye weeks were happening and my really weak receiver room that was waiting on Michael Thomas that never happened. I was just throwing in kickers, and I had Daniel Carlson and Brett Maher, and they carried me to the playoffs. My kickers were like the strength of my team, and they could put up some good points. 6-point special teams, and then if anyone recovers a ball in the end zone, it's also 6 points. Anything to add on that, Pat?
No, I'm probably going to draft a couple kickers this year. I don't think I did last year. And I get the impression that people think the Scott Fishbowl scoring is sort of, I don't know, that it punishes wide receivers. I feel like people tend not to draft wide receivers nearly as aggressively as they do at best balls or home leagues. And I don't know. I mean, I still feel like the more wide receiver heavy my rosters have been, the more emphasis I've put on that position, the better I've done in past Scott Fishbowls. I just think it's when you can acquire really good wide receivers in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th round of the Scott Fishbowl draft, and then you can, plow 4 or 5 receivers into flex spots. I don't know. I kind of like to roll that way sometimes. So sometimes I'm not as true to the wide receiver heavy build as I always plan to be going in. But, the way people fade receivers in the Scott Fishbowl draft makes me want to draft them aggressively that much more.
Can I add something to kind of what Pat said? There was one thing I really wanted to get out to, those that are listening in, that are in the Scott Fishbowl. I've done, got lucky enough to do pretty well the last couple years, and I noticed the key is that 9th, 10th, and 11th round. If you can hit on specifically the wide receivers in those rounds, you are money. So if I go back to Scott Fishbowl 11, I was able to take Deebo Samuel in the 10th round. That was the year he was wide receiver 3. Last year in Scott Fishbowl 12, I got Devontae Smith in the 9th round, wide receiver 9. getting James. There are other value picks in there, whether you look at James Conner 2 years ago, he was RB5 coming off in the 11th round. Kenneth Walker in the 10th round last year, RB9 after he took over the reins from week 6 on. That's the sweet spot. If you can hit those late round wide receivers, and obviously you got to do well in the earlier rounds, but that's where the difference maker is in those 3 rounds, from my experience the last couple years, that have really kind of pole vaults your team into the finals or the semifinals.
Anything to add to that, Pat?
I agree. I mean, wow, getting Debo that late that year, that was obviously with the season he had, I can see why that was just huge for Brad.
Well, I want to make sure, just before we get into the mock draft, to make sure everyone knows about Underdog Fantasy. We're brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Best Ball Mania 4 is here, and Underdog Fantasy is giving away $15 million in prizes. Underdog Pick'em is also a great way to get down on your favorite MLB and NFL. Pat does it. Season player-long props. You got many ways to win over at Underdog, and Underdog is available in so many states. Head over to UnderdogFantasy.com and use promo code SGPN for a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com, promo code SGPN. So I'm 6. I gave Pat 6 because I want to see what he does. Brad 7, but I'm picking from the 1 spot in this one, and I went with Patrick Mahomes. And I want to shout out some of the tools out there. There's obviously a lot of podcasts and live streams. Go check them out. But Scott Rainier put a great post. Peter Howard put out a great post. Just different projections using this scoring model. RotoViz has some things. Addison Hayes, it's $1 donation, and you get his access to his full spreadsheet that'll show you how players would have done last year with this scoring. Linda Lyons, she put something out. She loves kickers, so she put something out with kickers. But there's just a lot of stuff out there. So all you do is just type in SFB13 in Google or on Twitter or whatever, and you can find a lot of great resources. And there's some drafts happening right now, so you can look at the ADP, kind of see what people are doing. And what I found out is Mahomes isn't traditionally the 101 for a lot of people. Pat, any resources you want to plug?
No, those are all really good ones you mentioned, and it concerns me that Addison Hayes is so in tune to the scoring system, because I believe he's in my division this year. So that's worrisome.
Hey, you just got to pay $1 and you get access to all his stuff.
Nice. I may have to do that so I can pick his brain and use it against him in our draft.
So I'm going to go through the first 12 picks, and then we'll just talk about them. Mahomes at 1, Hurts at 2, Allen at 3, Burrow at 4, Jackson 5, Fields at 7, Herbert 8. Actually, 6 was Fields, 7 was Herbert, 8 was Chase, 9 was Jefferson, 10 was Lawrence, 11 was Kelsey, 12 was Christian McCaffrey. Pat, what stood out to you in this first round?
The quarterback run, for sure, just at the top. And I kind of thought maybe either Burrow or Lamar Jackson might get to me at 106. Wasn't the case, and I was content to go with Fields. The other thing, I guess, that stood out, there's no way Travis Kelce is lasting till the 11th pick in a Scott Fishbowl draft. And I was really tempted to take him at 106. I always hate what my build looks like when I go tight end. If I cave and take Kelce in the first round. So, I guess the Kelce slippage and then just the big quarterback run to come right out of the gate.
You could make an argument for Kelce at the 101 with this format. I mean, it's 5 points if he catches a 10-yard first down. It's just ridiculous, and he did that like 82 times last year. So, Brad, anything that stood out to you? Again, our picks, I took Mahomes at 1. Pat took Fields at 6, and then Brad took Herbert at 7. We all went quarterback. Brad, any thoughts on anything in this round?
I think seeing the first running back come off the board, not until pick 12, is interesting to me. And then I was completely shocked that Herbert is the 7th quarterback off the board right now. That just screams value. Don't reach for something in the first round. Just take what falls to you. if those guys are gone, and let's say you're not a believer in Lamar Jackson's return to greatness or Justin Fields or whatever, you're staring at Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Don't overthink it. Take the value there, especially even if you're in the back end of the first. Don't reach for somebody if you're like, oh man, I gotta have a quarterback right now. And you're looking at Travis Kelce at 111. Right? Would you rather have Travis Kelce or Dak Prescott? It seems pretty straightforward to me in the first round. Take that value.
Yeah, and so the second round we saw Barkley, Diggs, Kupp, Bijan, Tyreek Hill, Deshaun Watson, Dak Prescott, Austin Eckler, CeeDee Lamb, Jonathan Taylor, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and A.J. Brown. So, Pat, anything that stood out to you in that round?
Just a star-studded round. I mean, like I think all the picks were pretty, other than Barkley. Like I think Barkley went a little too early at 201, but pretty much I'd be pretty elated if I got Jonathan Taylor at 210 in the Scott Fish Bowl, or for that matter, A.J. Brown or Amon-Ra St. Brown at the end of the second round. So like, for me personally, like Dak was the last quarterback. I generally don't like going quarterback in a super flex draft, but like Dak was the last guy that I would have been willing to do that with there. So, lock up the quarterback position, and he gives me sort of a different profile than I get with Fields, my first round quarterback.
Yeah, and so Brad took Deshaun Watson to balance with Herbert. We could see a lot. We had Michael F. Florio on the show, and he talked a little bit about, don't think that he's not going to run the ball anymore. Last year, there was no reason for him to run the ball when he just was getting familiar with that offense. They were, pretty much out of the playoffs at the time he took over. And, Deshaun Watson didn't look like himself, but he was probably coached a little bit to just take it easy. We expect him to be I don't know if he's going to be back to normal, but more himself this year. With everything he went through the last couple of seasons. Brad, anything stick out to you other than, my question to you guys is Bijan, is that too early for Bijan?
No, I don't think so. I think like Pat was talking about, I wouldn't have been shocked if he was the number 2 running back off the board. Now, maybe that's the dynasty Brad coming out saying that a little bit, but if Atlanta runs the ball the volume and the amount that they ran the ball last year, and Bijan gets all of that, that he's going to smash that ADP. And then the last one is getting Cooper Kupp as the 4th receiver off the board. It's like people looked at it and was like, oh, well, he burned me last year, but he really burned you because he got hurt, not because he didn't play well when he was on the field. So getting Cooper Kupp in the front end of the second is a really nice value, I think.
I think it's extremely important in the second round to remember there is a third round reversal. And so you might be sitting there at the 212 or the 211 or the 210 and go, I'm going to get Kirk Cousins on the way back, or I'm going to get, Breece Hall on the way back. I can take this other guy. You're not, because it's going to flip on you, and you need to make sure. Another thing I did want to point out, I do think there's a difference with Sleeper in my fantasy league. Sleeper, I believe you have to put a kicker, and it's just flexed for my fantasy league. You don't have to play a kicker. But again, I'm telling people they probably should play multiple, especially during those bye weeks. But third round starts on the right, and that's going to be Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Breece Hall, Tua, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Mark Andrews, Chris Olave, Josh Jacobs, Kirk Cousins, Jalen Waddle, and T. Higgins. Pat, anything stick out to you in this round?
No, fairly predictable, I would say, for the most part. A lot of the guys who went in the third round, I think, deserved to go in the third round. I felt like personally the value in Andrews was too good to pass up there. The second best tight end. I think in most Scott Fish Bowl drafts, I expect him to go like early second. So to get him in the mid-third, that was just value I couldn't pass up. And that would be a rarity for me, Dave, because I don't think I've ever had like a really good tight end in the Scott Fish Bowl. Like people are always jumping at tight ends in my division. And like I've just never gotten one of the really elite ones.
Yeah, and it is every draft is a little different, and you get I've heard a lot of people that are big proponents of being the bully tight end strategy, where they get 3 or 4 tight ends in the first 5 picks, um, and then you might get like drafts like ours where we got a whole bunch of quarterbacks. I did plug in all the Scott Fishbowl settings. I do know that we're going against computers, so it's a little bit different than having 12 people. But I'm pretty sure I looked at 12 Scott Fishbowl drafts last year, and they all were different. I mean, the ADP is just there's so many different ways to build a team, and there's a lot of ways to do it right. It's not just one way, and that's what's so fun about the Scott Fishbowl. Um, for me, I think you're still seeing a lot of good receivers and running backs off the board where you're comfortable with some of these guys in the third round being your wide receiver one, your running back one, and we've only seen 2 tight ends go off the board, but I think Kelsey's just so far ahead of everybody else. Fourth round, we have Ramondre Stevenson, DK Metcalf, Tony Pollard, Devonta Smith, Najee Harris, Drake London, Ken Walker, Daniel Jones, TJ Hawkinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Deebo Samuel, Travis Etienne. Pat, anything stand out in this round?
Not especially. Like the running back value here was pretty good. I thought with you getting Ramondre at 401, Pollard going 403, Najee going 405. To get, either high volume running backs or high efficiency running backs or combinations of both maybe with Ramondre in the fourth round is pretty nice, especially in the fishbowl where, running backs, the half point per first down does tend to favor the running backs and, drive up value. And I think that's the perception among drafters. You typically see running backs driven up the board, but for those 3 guys to be here in the fourth round, pretty nice.
Yeah, I've gone running back early in a lot of previous drafts and wanted to try something different. And I felt good about how this one ended with getting Stevenson as my RB1 in the fourth round. And like you said, Tony Pollard, Najee Harris. We've been using Mike Clay's projections and just going into them as part of our recaps and looking at, what can we project for this year? And, Stevenson, Pollard, Harris, like these guys are projected to get 350 touches. And in this type of a setting where volume is king, those guys are really, really nice. And then you have Josh Jacobs right ahead of them. So, Brad, anything on this round for you?
Yeah, here's the first negative. Now, you'll see maybe when we get to, I don't know, the 7th round, my bias a little bit here. I think Deebo in the 4th, that's the ceiling for him to be. I get it. He had a wide receiver 8 season, but that was on the back of enormous rushing volume and touchdowns as well. And I just don't see that in the cards for him moving forward with Christian McCaffrey and Elijah Mitchell, both healthy and running the ball. Brock Purdy's not going to throw enough to really be able to produce super high wide receiver numbers. And when I can get Brandon Ayuk, who actually finished way above Deebo Samuel last season in fantasy points per game, 3 rounds later, the value is there, and I feel like it's a little bit of a reach for Deebo.
Yeah, and I agree. And so 5th round, Richardson, Goff, Rodgers, Keenan Allen, Geno Smith, Cooper, Watson, Ridley, Kittle, Aaron Jones, Hopkins, Wilson. Pat, what sticks out to you in this round?
That there were 5 quarterbacks taken in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th rounds combined, and then 5 quarterbacks in this round. So people were getting busy grabbing their quarterbacks. I thought it was interesting to see Anthony Richardson go at 501, right ahead of Jared Goff, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith. And I can't imagine this scoring system really benefits Anthony Richardson with the, rewards for completions and penalties for incompletions. I understand pursuing the running ability and that ceiling that he gives you as a guy who could potentially, do something similar to what Justin Fields did last year and run for 1,100 yards. But man, I think he's going to get punished probably with the passing. Not that I don't think he can become a decent passer, but his rookie year probably isn't going to be real pretty for him as a passer.
Yeah, that's their QB1, and this is a redraft format, and you got very efficient passers right behind him. Like Geno Smith was the most efficient passer in the league last year. Rodgers is always up there. Goff was excellent, and he added Jahmyr Gibbs to his weaponry, and then Russell Wilson gets addition by subtraction with Hackett being out of there, and then add Sean Payton, one of the one of the best offensive coordinators in my time. So, Brad, what are your thoughts about this round?
Wide receiver value. Round 5. These are all 5 guys that would not shock me to be top 12 at the position by the end of the season. And they're being drafted at wide receiver 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. You think about Keenan Allen consistently, when healthy, a top 12 wide receiver. DeAndre Hopkins consistently top 12. Amari Cooper looked like he could be last year. We'll see what happens. Christian Watson, the alpha on his team, down the field threat with a new quarterback, and Calvin Ridley coming back with Trevor Lawrence peaking as a new young quarterback. I just think the wide receiver value here is really nice with a pretty large upside for all of them.
Yeah, I will say this. Being at the end of this round sucked, seeing Goff, Rodgers, and Geno go off the board. Those are guys that I'm really targeting. I'd like to go with a top quarterback and then give me Goff or Rodgers or Geno as my second quarterback. So unless you're in the ramen division, that's what I'm planning on doing. So as far as Hopkins and Dalvin Cook in the next round, Pat, I was going to put a post out today of just asking DeAndre Hopkins and Dalvin Cook if they could please sign with teams now before the Scott Fish Bowl on Monday, because every year there's a wild card. We had Tyreek Hill's suspension a few years ago, Deshaun Watson last year. It's not injuries, it's suspensions or other stuff. This year we have the unknown, and you could go and you could draft a running back like Ramondre Stevenson. They signed Dalvin Cook tomorrow, or you can go get Traylon Burks early because he's the number one, and then they signed DeAndre Hopkins. So what are your thoughts there about how are you handling Dalvin Cook and Hopkins?
Yeah, that's worrisome. And like you said, Dave, there's going to be a domino effect with guys who could potentially be affected. Like I'm not that he's an early round pick, but I'm a big fan of Devon Achane. Like, I mean, I used to last year I was watching Texas A&M games, even though they weren't especially good, just because I wanted to see Achane play. And if Dalvin Cook lands in Miami, that obviously dampens enthusiasm for Devon Achane and what he might be able to do as a rookie. Traylon Burks, same thing. And there are other guys too, like Zeke Elliott's going to be somewhere. Leonard Fournette's going to be somewhere. Kareem Hunt is going to be somewhere. Not that those guys are going to necessarily come in and be workhorses, but they're going to clog up a committee and maybe, shove some guys aside or reduce the roles of others. So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things pending. And, we also kind of left out the Alvin Kamara suspension. If indeed that happens, I mean, maybe somehow that can be kicked down the road and someone gets a full season out of Kamara. Or maybe he does get suspended and it's a much heavier suspension than anyone expects and he misses like 10 or 12 games instead of 6. So, yeah, there are a lot of variables, and that definitely makes drafting in early July a challenge.
Yeah, and I see some comments in the chat. Yeah, Sam Howell's going to go much higher. I agree with you, absolutely. Brad, any thoughts on this round before we go to the next round?
Nope, not anything else.
Next round was Judy, Dobbins, Goddard, McLaurin, Pierce, DJ Moore, DeAndre Swift, Michael Pittman, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, Derek Carr, and Dalvin Cook. For me, what stands out, DeAndre Swift, he's dropped so far, and I know he's punished a lot of people, but he's really becoming a value. This running back value really stands out to me in this round. Pat, what are your thoughts?
Same. And to me, like Mixon, I'm not especially feeling great about Mixon for this year. But boy, to get him at 6'10", and even Miles Sanders, like I know, yes, he had a great situation last year, on this run-heavy team and having a really mobile quarterback in Jalen Hurts, which we know spikes the efficiency of running backs, and having a great offensive line. But I still feel like Sanders is going to get a lot of carries for Carolina this year, and that offensive line isn't bad. So, like, there's some value maybe to him in the late 6th round.
Yep. Brad?
Wide receivers, I don't like any of them in this round, and all of them have upside, and I get it, but this is where I start to concern myself with the wide receiver core in the 6th and the 7th round. It's a little early. It's a little bit of a dead zone to me. There's a lot of, well, we hope Jerry Jeudy and Russell Wilson can get it going. Well, we hope that Baker Mayfield can make Mike Evans useful. Well, we hope Justin Fields and DJ Moore work well together. Is Anthony Richardson going to be able to highly target Michael Pittman? Maybe, maybe not. There's a lot of question marks in these 2 rounds at the wide receiver position, which is why if you can get them early, in my opinion, you're probably a little bit better off and letting somebody else possibly get burned with Sam Howell and Terry McLaurin or Russell Wilson or Jarrett Stidham based on kind of what they're talking about in camp. I don't think Jarrett Stidham starting, just to throw that out there. But there's just a little too many question marks here. So,
yeah, and I don't want to skip too far ahead, but I'm looking at like the 8th round is kind of the cutoff. And those guys I don't even really think should be in the 8th round. But like Deontay Johnson and Tyler Lockett, I'm comfortable with them being, 2 or 3 on my team. But after that, it gets pretty ugly. As far as the next round, we had Cam Akers, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Kyle Pitts. I think especially if there's dynasty people in the draft, going to go a lot higher than that. Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans, Marquise Brown, Jordan Love, Christian Kirk, Matthew Stafford, Darren Waller. And so I have to ask, I was listening to our show, Brad, and you and I had varying opinions on Matthew Stafford. And I know we were a little opposite on Jordan Love as well. So, Pat, what are your thoughts about Jordan Love and Matthew Stafford just for 2023?
All right. Well, I'm a Packers fan. I'm not wildly optimistic about Jordan Love, although I might be biased because I just hated the pick when it was made. I thought, a quarterback was, trading up for a quarterback when you've got Aaron Rodgers, I thought it was really silly. But, man, we just don't know. We don't know. He made one start, and it was against the Chiefs in 2021 when Rodgers had COVID, and the Chiefs blitzed the hell out of him, and he didn't handle it well. And but then again, Patrick Mahomes didn't play that well that day either. And then, he looked great in mop-up duty against the Eagles last year when the Eagles were swabbing the deck with the Packers, and they were, it was just blowout time in the second half. He looked really good in that game, but then again, the Eagles were playing like this really soft coverage with the big lead. So there's just been nothing really to sink your teeth into in the evaluation of Jordan Love so far. And Stafford, I'm just worried about the fitness of his arm. The injuries have now he's had back issues in the past.
Elbow.
Now he's had issues with the throwing arm. I'm a little worried he doesn't make it through the season. Not getting the rushing yardage isn't going to kill you as much in this format. And if he's your second quarterback, this is a guy who could possibly complete, a pretty good percentage of his passes and throw for more than 4,000 yards. But, I do worry about the ability to stay healthy over the full season.
Yeah, and you're always looking for that edge, and you're trying to look at how can I gain value. And you look at these quarterbacks, especially, your second quarterback, as a way to gain some value. How late can I wait to get that second quarterback if I don't go like Fields Watson or Herbert Watson? How do I get that value? And Stafford is a guy that people target because of how good he's been in the past. And I feel like there's a lot of guys with a lot of question marks and whoever guesses right is going to get a big reward, but it's pretty risky after round 5. Brad, anything to add?
Don't plan on Pitts and Waller being there in the 7th. Like, if you're looking at this and you're like, oh, all right, I definitely want to wait on tight end because I think Darren Waller for the Giants is going to have a monster year and be a top 3 tight end again because of targets, and the wide receiving room at New York is suspect, right? They add a lot of speed. We just don't know what it looks like. They're not going to be there at the 7th round. Like, this is – they get an extra PPR point. They get an extra first down point. These guys will be long gone. So don't wait too long on tight end if you want one of those top 6 or 7 guys.
Yeah, I'd move the tight ends up at least a round or 2 for each of them. And then for the, Cam Akers is an interesting player. Looked really good at the end of last year. Looks like he's going to get a lot of volume. Next round, Alexander Madison, James Conner, Javonte Williams, Rashad White, Bryce Young, Deontay Johnson, David Montgomery, Tyler Lockett, Kyler Murray, Isaiah Pacheco, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston. For me, I think Kyler Murray is going to be an interesting player because just like last year, like some people were getting Deshaun Watson late, hoping they could make the playoffs. Then boom, insert Deshaun Watson. You're going to go to the championship. I don't know if Kyler Murray plays at all this year. I just don't know what's going to happen. Like if they bring him back week 7 or 8 and they're 1-7, like what does that look like? But maybe I'm just being pessimistic. Pat, what are your thoughts here about this round and Kyler Murray?
Really good point on Kyler Murray. I mean, there is definitely a disincentive to rushing him back this year for a team that's clearly in rebuilding, if not tanking mode. So, this was kind of an interesting round with the way the receivers went. And I do think, Dave, you said it earlier with after Deontay and Tyler Lockett, I don't know that the bottom necessarily falls out because I like some of the receivers who went in the following round too, but they're younger guys and not as certain. And things are definitely starting to get shaky here at wide receiver. And by the way, if I can just go back to round 7 for a second, I just need to say that freaking Brad just gutted me when he took Brandon Ayuk ahead of me there. Like that was... I was really
you got
wishing
me back with Deontay Johnson because that's what I was going to take, and he was gone.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I was really wishing it had been a bot in front of me instead of you, Brad, because that was. I'm just glad that hadn't happened during my actual Scott Fishbowl draft, or I would have just been crushed by that. Because, I wound up taking Mike Evans, and like what Brad was saying before about Brandon Ayuk, how he should not be going so much later than Debo. I agree. I mean, I think Ayuk is terrific, and the 7th round is just ridiculous value.
Yep.
Yeah, and Tyler Lockett, I saw a stat from PFF about, receivers that were what the percentage of how open they were on routes, and Tyler Lockett was number 1 over Cooper Kupp. He was open on like 70% of his routes.
Wow.
Like he's just a great receiver. He's really been underrated for most of his career, and because of his size, people have just never really seen him as being one of the top receivers in the league. But this guy gets open, and so does Deontay Johnson, and that's why you see such high completion percentage for guys like Geno, where they can just have guys wide open, and that's why you see so many targets go to Deontay Johnson. Like, you're taught from a very young age, you throw to the open guy. And Deontay's always open, and that's why he leads the Steelers in targets every single year. Alexander Madison, I want to ask about him, Pat. I feel like he's probably going to go a little bit higher because, this ADP maybe hasn't caught up with the news. What are your thoughts on Madison? Do you feel comfortable with him as your RB2?
I do feel comfortable with him as my RB2, not as my RB1. Probably far-fetched to think that he's going to serve a workhorse role there. I mean, I think it's probably going to be, supporting roles from some combination of Dwayne McBride, Ty Chandler, Kene Nwangwu. But, like, he is going to get the leading role, the head of the committee role, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, to get him there is pretty good value. And it's kind of weird. Like I thought we were going to get a big spike in his ADP, and it has not gone up as high as I thought it was going to go up.
There's a lot. I had Marcus Grant on the show, and the first thing he said was that instantly when two things happened when Dalvin Cook got cut. Alexander Mattison went on trade blocks, and then everybody threw out their zag. So everybody, that was zigging towards Alexander Mattison, everyone else wanted to outsmart that person, and it's Ty Chandler. It's I keep saying you said the name right, Ngagwe.
Wongwu,
and then and then Dwayne McBride, and I get it. Like, Madison's been in the league for a while; he's never been the guy. But there was a lot of people that just were like instantly going, and I think that's really suppressed the value, and that's what I was worried about as someone that likes Madison. I like Madison and I like his cost, but I'm not going to take Alexander Madison over Josh Jacobs. Like, there's got to be a price point, and so if he's in the 6th round, I'll be interested. But anything higher than that, I'm probably out. Going on to the next round, Evan Ingram, again, probably a little bit higher than this for these tight ends here, but Evan Ingram, Kamara, Burks, Freiermuth, Njoku, Dotson, Gibson, Schultz, Charbonnet, Pickens, Cooks, Cook. Brad, thoughts on this round?
This is where I talked about it earlier, the 9th, 10th, 11th. This is where you're looking for those guys where you who's going to hit, who has the most potential at jumping this ADP and just destroying it. That's what you want out of these guys. And when you see the James Cooks of the world, okay, well, does he get what he got at the back end of the year, or does he get kind of vultured because of Damian Harris? Do you see George Pickens take that next step after an 800-yard rookie season? Do you see Jahan Dotson takes that next step because after a 7-touchdown rookie season? Now you're looking for who's going to hit, and I think some of these wide receivers really could. And again, I got to make my yearly plug for Antonio Gibson. He is the best running back on that team, in Brad's opinion. He can pass catch, and now you bring in Eric Bieniemy. You hope that he realizes the potential that Gibson has, and this guy can be a league winner for, I don't know, I've been saying it like 3 years in a row now. So
well, and then Kareem Hunt signs there the day after you pick him. Eric Bieniemy's boy. I'm just making that part up. But Pat, any thoughts on this round other than the fact that tight ends are probably too good to be true here?
Well, I guess Brad and I are members of the Mutual Commanders Admiration Society here, because I love Jahan Dotson. I mean, like, had he still been around, he might have tempted me into picking a 6th straight wide receiver. Yeah, I really like Dotson. But yeah, this was kind of an interesting round with running back uncertainty. Like in the previous round, we had seen guys like Madison, James Conner, Rashad White, David Montgomery, guys who are going to seemingly have pretty certain roles. But man, then you get to the 9th round and you've got, James Cook, who I don't think anyone really knows quite what he's going to be or what kind of role he's going to have exactly just yet. Zach Charbonnet, very curious to see how roles are divided in Seattle. Gibson, who, Scott Turner didn't seem to like. Hopefully Eric Bieniemy is more fond of him than Scott Turner was. And Alvin Kamara, who obviously has all the uncertainty hanging over his head. So, yeah, the sure things are pretty much gone at running back, I guess, after round 8. And, we're left with hopes and prayers here.
Yeah, James Conner, best value. I'm with you, man. I think he's gonna eat a lot. Brad and I talked a little bit. We talked about the NFC West last week, and we talked about handcuffing him with Keontae Ingram, because of how cheap Ingram is. But it looks like this offense is going to be James Conner and Colt McCoy. It's probably going to be a lot of James Conner this year. In this format, he's a massive value, and people are just sleeping on him because it's a bad offense. With David Montgomery, going back to him, we saw how valuable Jamal Williams was. We don't expect David Montgomery to get 17 touchdowns, but I thought going back to that round before, absolutely love those 3 picks, the Johnson, Montgomery, and Lockett. We talked earlier about how things can be kind of crazy. Kamara, a suspension looming, is going to make him lower. And so if it comes out, in August that he's a 2-game suspension, that person's going to get a massive value at the 9. If it's a 6-game suspension, it's going to be a tough one to swallow as your, second or third running back. The next round, Jamison Williams, Kadarius Toney, Gabriel Davis, A.J. Dillon, Juju Smith-Schuster, Rashad Penny, Samaje Perine, Brian Robinson, Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, Michael Thomas, Cortland Sutton. Thoughts here, Pat?
8 wide receivers in this round and guys with big ranges of outcomes. Kadarius Toney, Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, Michael Thomas. Some really interesting guys there. You took Jamison Williams, who, I certainly would have gone much higher than this if not for the suspension. But, man, if you can weather the storm without him and then get him back, and he's like your, hold on, I'm looking at your roster here, your 4th receiver. Like, that's a nice way to add a very potent weapon at wide receiver pretty late in the draft.
Yeah, that was what I'm going for there. Brad, anything on here? I like your Perine pick.
Yeah, me too, or I wouldn't have picked him. But I think there's 4 wide receivers that hit that mark of what I was talking about, Devonta Smith or Debo in the 9th, 10th round, Kenneth Walker, the back half of the season. You already talked about one in Jamal Williams. He's coming back in week 7, and he could be an extremely talented player for your team. Kadarius Toney is number 2. Elijah Moore, who I think is severely undervalued in the 10th round. Now, that may be some of my Cleveland Browns fandom coming out. And then Rashad Bateman, who I put out a tweet around. This dude's metrics last year when playing are very, very good. And if his challengers is a 30-year-old guy who hasn't really played football in the last 2 years, and a rookie. So Bateman, I think, is a very good breakout candidate for that 3rd-year breakout that used to be a very common thing that's now just kind of been thrown to the wayside because of the likes of guys like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Garrett Wilson, Olave, and those guys. So I think those 4 are great picks in this round that could give you that jump that you're looking for out of your late round wide receivers.
So we're just going to go through a few more rounds before we run out of time. But, Pat, anything else on this round?
No, I don't think so. I did like the running backs who went relative to, where in the draft they went. Like, I don't love A.J. Dillon, but getting him in the 10th round, not bad. I mean, I took Rashad Penny, who I think probably has the inside track on early down duty for the Eagles. And, Brad, nice pick with Perine and Brian Robinson, even though, I love Antonio Gibson. Robinson's not a bad value in the 10th.
Yeah. And then to the next round, we have Flowers, Kmet, A-Chain, Mooney, Herbert, Kincaid, Pickett, Elijah Mitchell, Okonkwo, Jamal Williams, Greg Dulcich, and then you have Brock Purdy. A lot of question marks, but some guys with some high ceilings here. If A-Chain is the top guy over there and gets the volume that the A-Chain truthers would enjoy, that could be a big one. If Dalvin Cook goes there, it's not too bad because you're getting him in the 11th round. Herbert, I know there's stands out there for him. 11th round is a low risk. And then you have Chig, who I think is going to go higher than this, and Dulcich are guys that people really, really are excited about. And then again, we talked about Alvin Kamara potential suspension. Jamal Williams ADP would skyrocket if that were to happen. And then I took Mr. Purdy. Pat, 202 stamp, copy and paste like a factory. Pat, what are your thoughts on this round?
Yeah, let's talk about Purdy for a second. I mean, I'm really interested to see where he's going to go and where Trey Lance is going to go and even where Sam Darnold is going to go in Scott Fishbowl drafts. Like people are going to have to show their cards, I think, because I don't know. Like I've seen a lot of opinions, but more about specific players in that situation, and fewer people willing to go out on a limb as to how they think it's going to play out. So I think we're going to see how people think it's going to play out when people have to draft or not draft these guys in certain spots, because like all these guys are going to seem like values where they go, but like if somehow Trey Lance does win that job and Purdy doesn't play, you're going to be like, oh, I spent an 11th round on Purdy. But if he's the starter all year, I mean, my God, the value is immense.
And so with the tight ends, like the next 2 rounds, you got some decent tight ends. Higbee and Everett were both really good last year in spurts. Kmet was top 10 tight end last year. I know these guys will probably go a round or 2 higher than they are here, but are you guys okay with getting the late tight end and letting the value fall to you, or are you hard set on getting an early round tight end?
I got screwed last year, right? I took Waller in the 3rd round, got hurt, and boom, it basically didn't turn into anything the remainder of the year. So I consciously made all right, I'm going to pass on tight end. Let's see how it goes. Let's go with a couple super athletic tight ends that could turn into something. And then let's make sure I get that floor guy that, if Kincaid's just not getting the playing time, he's not getting the snaps, you plug Tyler Higbee in. There was a 4 or 5 game stretch where he's getting 10, 11 targets from Matthew Stafford when he was healthy. So I think a lot of this, you see the athletic tight end, whether you look at Gerald Everett or Okonkwo or Dulcich or Kincaid, Kmet, Higbee is kind of that non-athletic guy, if you want to call him that. He's just kind of a chain mover, but I think the value that you get here looks okay if you don't go early round tight end.
Pat?
I'm always like sort of aghast at how far people push up tight ends in my Scott Fishbowl draft. So like I'm probably not going to get one of the elite tight ends. It just like I don't see myself. Well, I don't see Kelsey even being there for me at 106. Like that's probably not even going to be an option. I kind of doubt Andrews is there at 206. So yeah, I mean, I think the earliest I've ever taken a tight end in the Scott Fishbowl was like my first year when I took like Delaney Walker in the 8th round or something like that. So I will probably once again go dumpster diving at the position and, try to cobble it together with the Sam Laportas and Irv Smiths of the world.
Yeah, it's last year I had Schultz and I took him way too early. It did pay off at the end of the year, but man, I suffered for a little bit when he was struggling, and they had a quarterback injury that really took things down. So I think having depth is important if you don't get one of the top guys. But even if you get one of the top guys, like don't forget about the depth. Don't grab a guy. Your second tight end should be someone that you're comfortable throwing in there, because in this format, it is just so important. So, of course, get Kelsey if you can. But if you can't get Kelsey and you get Dallas Goedert, one of the middle tier guys, middle tight end 1 guys, don't punt it and then end up like I did right here where I got Hayden Hurst. I should have gotten in that round, round 10, 11, I should have went and got another guy instead of scooping up all those running backs.
Ooh, I don't know. Hayden Hurst might be a little something this year. He looked good last year. Now I know he's going from Joe Burrow to a rookie quarterback, but I like that pick to be that second tight end for you.
Appreciate that. So I'm just going to go through the rest of my team, and then I'll let you guys do the same thing. I took Jerick McKinnon, Jeff Wilson, high upside guys on good offenses. McKinnon was absolutely on fire at the end of the season last year. If you had him in your fantasy football playoffs, you probably won your league unless you were facing against Travis Kelce. Jeff Wilson, looking at Mike Clay's projections, Jeff Wilson is the RB1 for fantasy football purposes for Miami. Is that going to happen? I don't know. But I'll take a shot at it on the 13th round in a tournament style like this. Justin Tucker, I'm going to draft 3 or 4 kickers. I might be the first one to grab a kicker, but I'm at least going to gobble up 4 of them, because I really do think that it was a difference maker last year for me. won 6 or 7 games in a row with 3 or 4 kickers in my lineup. DJ Chark, I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 over there for Bryce Young. He's really good when healthy. Just got to stay healthy. Hayden Hurst, Jason Sanders, Michael Badgley, good kickers on good offenses. Joshua Kelly, if Austin Eckler goes down, I don't know who's going to be the guy. I think that is a good spot for Ezekiel Elliott and some of the other guys. But until further notice, Josh Kelly, not Isaiah Spiller, is RB2 on the depth chart. And the coaching staff went to Josh Kelly, not Isaiah Spiller last year. Van Jefferson, we'll see. Darius Slayton, we'll see. And then Jake Moody, just because it's fun. Pat, any thoughts on those players?
Yeah, I was just talking to someone about Jerick McKinnon earlier today. Like I like him more in best balls than in managed leagues because I know last year I always had such a hard time ranking him every week. You just he was doing so much damage with touchdowns on so few touches. I mean, he was getting a lot of targets in those weeks when he was on a touchdown binge, but I don't know. It's a little unpredictable with him. I like how you loaded up on the kickers. I might have to take a cue from you on that. And I really liked the DJ Chark pick, who I think is, if I probably had to put money on anyone to lead Carolina in receiving yardage, I think I'd bet on Chark. Although I wouldn't do it with a great deal of confidence.
Well, and, going back to Jerick McKinnon, when I got to go to the combine and interview running backs, and every single running back talks about protecting the quarterback as something that they're working on this offseason. Jerick McKinnon, at his size, somehow is one of the best bodyguards in football, and that keeps him on the field, and that's why he's back with Kansas City. And when it came down to 2-minute offenses, it was really nice to have him on the field, and that's something that I picked up. Some of these rookie running backs, if they can't get on the field on third down, which is a money down, because they can't protect the quarterback. And that's definitely a problem for a lot of these running backs, especially the lighter ones that are built like McKinnon. But for whatever reason, McKinnon is just nasty at it. Pat, any thoughts on the rest of your picks?
Yeah, I mean, I did take a third quarter. I don't know. Unlike a dynasty super flex league, there's maybe less value to having a third quarterback in the Scott Fishbowl because, you can't automatically count on any quarterback you throw in there getting you double-digit points. With that scoring system, you could easily get negative points from a bad quarterback. But, yeah, I took Kenny Pickett anyway, threw a few darts on rookie receivers with rookie running backs, with Tank Bigsby and Tyjae Spears. A couple more tight ends to throw in the fire. Mike Gesicki, who I'm actually sort of high on this year. It was just so weird that the Dolphins franchise tagged him and then completely marginalized him last year. Now he's reunited with his old college coach at Penn State, Bill O'Brien, who's the Patriots offensive coordinator. And look, I don't think Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki are going to light the world on fire, but it should be pointed out the last time Bill O'Brien was calling plays for the Patriots, their tight ends combined for 2,300 yards and 24 touchdowns. So, that was Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez. Still, I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic that Gesicki gets back on the tight end map this year. And then, a few shots at receiver with Nico Collins and Sky Moore. Kind of holding out hope that maybe Sky Moore, we're so used to seeing rookie receivers make big impacts now. Maybe patience is warranted for a guy who is going from the MAC conference to the NFL. And, things start to click for him in year 2. So that's about it. I did take one kicker, Dave, following your lead. I grabbed Graham Gano late.
I like the shots on the running backs. One thing that was really interesting, normally you see the quarterback change happen during the bye week. A lot of teams change their running back after the bye week. Of course, sometimes you saw injuries too, but you saw a lot of rookies, James Cook, Rashad White, taking over backfields, Tyler Algier, taking over backfields after the bye week or later in the season, fresh legs versus, the guys that started the season that are either injured or, slowing down. And you could really hit some massive gains there at the end. So I really like that strategy. I'm probably gonna steal some of that. Brad, any thoughts on Pat's picks or my picks?
No, I like the tight end calls, right? I mean, at this point, you're at what, tight end 20-ish. So again, the athletic upside of Mike Gesicki, the athletic upside of Hayden Hurst. I mean, Hayden Hurst was a first-round tight end, for crying out loud. Now, I know that was like 7 years ago or whatever, but we've seen these guys flash in the past. So being able to get that position, a secondary tight end that late that has some upside. And then I agree with the rookie running backs as well, but not even just from a back half of the season perspective. I mean, Tank Bigsby, I feel like, is a guy that give you value coming out in week 1. Right. Doug Peterson's talked about that already. I think he's going to see some early down work. And if he proves that he can do well, then I think he's going to build a little bit of a role for himself for the majority of the season. So I really like the Bigsby pick as well.
Let's talk about your picks and get out of here.
So I had 2 kind of goals in mind here. The one was I want handcuff running backs that don't really have any challengers. So Jaylen Warren in Pittsburgh, if Najee Harris, knock on wood, we don't want that. But if he does happen to hurt himself, Jaylen Warren has really no challengers there. We saw him get a little bit of work last year as an undrafted free agent. We've heard Mike Tomlin rave about him and all these things. So I think he's a great, back end running back to kind of handcuff Najee Harris. Keontae Ingram, right, with Dave, you and I talked about him on a prior show, and him being somebody that if James Conner gets hurt is likely going to get the bulk of that work. And then Zamir White, even though we saw Las Vegas lean on Amir Abdullah last season for pass catching work, if Josh Jacobs gets hurt, Amir Abdullah is not the first and second down guy. It's going to be Zamir White. And I think that was the main goal with the running back position. And the wide receivers was, again, value. If I look at the 3 wide receivers that I took back to back to back, Isaiah Hodgins is the number 1 in his team. Now, I know you could argue Darren Waller will be the one, but Isaiah Hodgins came in halfway through the season, after being dropped by Buffalo, and was the best player for the New York Giants on the offensive side of the ball outside of Saquon Barkley. So seeing him year 2 and new guys coming in, Jalen Hyatt, Paris Campbell, Wan'Dale Robinson coming back off an injury, he's going to be I'm projecting a little bit, but I feel like he's going to be the major target getter after Darren Waller there. And then John Mechie was kind of a shot. Hey, he could be the alpha in Houston if he's able to come out in week 1 and play. We hope that health does work out for him. So that was kind of the approach. And then all the news with Tim Patrick, maybe I'm reacting a little bit here, but he was very usable before his injury 2 years ago. And then there was a lot of hype around him and Russell Wilson going into the season last year before he tore his ACL. And you're already hearing rumblings around how he looks really good coming back. And that was a very early ACL tear. So you hope he gets in, and they're going to most likely run quite a bit of 3 wide receiver sets, I would expect, even though there's a lot of hype around Sean Payton wanting to run the ball a lot. So we'll see how that plays out. But that was the 2 plays: backup running backs and value wide receivers.
Pat, any final thoughts?
Yeah, loved the Hodgins pick. Especially, they have so many like smaller receivers with the Giants that, Hodgins, a big body like that, and it showed up when he had a 4 touchdown outburst in like a 5-week span last season. And Tim Patrick, it's funny, like no one ever wants to give that dude any respect, but all the reports are like, yeah, that's Russ's guy. Russ loves him, and then they're like going to Denver Nuggets playoff games together. So like, he's going to go in the 18th round of every Scott Fishbowl draft and every home league draft, and he's probably going to wind up as like the best receiver in Denver. It seems like it's destined to happen that way. So, but yeah, like it seemed like Brad was almost appealing to me with some of these picks. I'm a big Trey Lance guy. I love Jelani Woods. So a 10 from the Eastern European judge here on the card.
Well, make sure you give our guest a follow, Pat. I always talk about last year on the X. I was listening to Pat on the way up to the expo. First person I see at the bar is Pat. I'm like, all right, I got to go introduce myself. It's such a nice guy. We ended up talking about rookie running backs for at least an hour. But make sure you give him a follow. Pat, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Dave. Imagine that you would walk into a bar and see me there. Just what a remarkable coincidence. I almost never go to bars. So,
well, I might see you and Brad this year at the expo.
Oh, yeah.
So, everyone, as always, make sure you subscribe. Give us your questions. Don't forget about the Discord. And Jakey would be mad if I didn't say,
Hit that go button. Hit that go button.
hit that subscriber button. He wants to watch the show just for that part. So, thanks, guys. Good luck this season.
Cheers.